Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada, and I hope you are having an excellent afternoon. We have a lot to talk about this afternoon. But before we do, don't forget to like this video, share it, subscribe to this channel. Please remember that when you like this video, you share it, and you subscribe to this channel, what happens is that it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. What it does is it tells the algorithm that videos like this are important, but we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm does not mean that this video is not important. As a second announcement, I must inform you that I am currently going through transnational repression. So essentially what that is where countries reach across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. As you know, I'm an American citizen, and I have been speaking out against human rights violations abroad. And so one way in which countries reach across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizen or foreign nationals, in the case of the Republic of Ireland, is they will collude with transnational cyber groups to actually hack into social media accounts and to prevent the message from going out. And so over the last few weeks, I've had cyber hackers with information technology experience get into the microphone with their capacities, and not necessarily getting into the microphone, but actually hacking into the microphone and creating a lot of disturbances with the video and editing the thumbnail and altering the thumbnail. And so I want to let you know that what I'm trying to do is just really keep the integrity of these videos, such as the thumbnails, to make sure that they are correct. Um, there may be instances where these videos are, the cyber hackers are interfering with the content in these videos, and that's just something that I really can't do anything about personally. And so being that I wouldn't be able to do anything about that, ladies and gentlemen, uh, essentially, because I can't, then I'll keep those edits, excuse me, I'll keep those mistakes in this video. So as to keep it as evidence. As you know, that each thumbnail has an exhibit number, and that means that each of these videos are going to be serving as exhibits in the case that this becomes too much and I really need to take this to court. Now that that's been said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that on February 12th is the International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism as and when conducive to terrorism. And it breaks my heart that I have to talk about a story like this 30 days before that International Day. As you know, that International Day is on February the 12th. And so as a person that is an academic, so what does this resolution, it's a resolution by the United Nations Security Council. So what does it do? Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, what it does is it invites all member states, including civil society, the private sector, academia, and the media, to commemorate the International Day, including through educational and public awareness raising activities, and to share best practices in this regard. And so I guess that's essentially what I'm going to be doing in this video, to bring awareness to events that we have seen in New Orleans and also Las Vegas and I'm doing that to reiterate almost 30 days before the International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism and when conducive to terrorism. I'm doing that 30 days prior because I think it's timely. It's timely to do it now. And the way that I'm going to bring awareness to acts that are contrary to national security is by talking about a story that came out of the Intercept. So there was a story that was recently published by Nick Turse in the Intercept, and that's called U.S. Military Service is the Strongest Predictor of Carrying Out Extremist Violence. And in the story, Nick Turse talks about between 1990 and 2010, so basically Nick is talking about 7 people per year with U.S. military backgrounds committed extreme crimes. Think about that for a moment. And I'm reflecting on that as well. I'm reflecting deeply on that, why that is. And Nick goes on further to say that since 2011, the number has jumped to almost 45 per year, according to data from Michael Jensen. So a researcher named Michael Jensen actually published an extensive body of research and found that, to reiterate, that this number jumped up 45 people per year. Now, Terse goes on to say that military service is also the single strongest individual predictor of becoming a mass casualty offender. So what does that mean? Nick Terse, I think what Nick Terse is telling us from that article that I read, just one can infer that if you are within the military service, then you are more likely to commit an act, as we have seen as we've seen in New Orleans and as we've seen in Las Vegas. Now, there is another separate case as an aside, and I know that a lot of people don't view this as an act of extreme violence, and I don't know enough about this particular form of protest. I'm just bringing it up just as a reference point. So as you know, there was a man within the U.S. military named Aaron Bushnell who set himself ablaze, and this self-immolation is known as a form of protest. And so what we've come to understand from the video that Aaron Bushnell put out to the public was that he was protesting the United States involvement in the Middle East in the Israeli-Gaza conflict. And so, in my personal opinion, and this is my honest comment, is that I think that Aaron Bushnell could have actually advocated for the people in the Middle East if that was an action that he wanted to do. He could have done it differently. He did not have to set himself ablaze. He's not here now to let me refer back. Essentially, I don't think that that was an effective form of protest. And sometimes protest is really not, even if a group of people come out on the street in large numbers, sometimes that's not even effective. However, we all have a right to protest when we disagree with something that the government is doing. And this was Aaron's way of protesting. But I don't condone that form of protest because I don't think that it really solved what he wanted to solve. I don't think that it actually changed anything. I don't think it even moved the needle a bit. And so I think there could have been other ways in which he could have protested to bring awareness to the issues that were happening in the Middle East if that was his goal. Similar to what we've seen in Las Vegas, as we know that there was a gentleman who found himself in a state of mind and was quite stressed, and there was an incident in Las Vegas at the Trump Hotel. And so I think, ladies and gentlemen, even in that case, there could have been other ways in which to to protest, to peacefully protest, or to advocate for change. Remember, these are men in military. These are men in the military, and sometimes men in military have influence. I'm not saying in all cases, but I didn't actually look deeply into the backgrounds of these individuals, but I know that he seemed quite influential after he protested in the way in which he did. So if he was influential that way, I'm pretty sure he could have been very influential in a different way. So again, I don't condone the manner in which he protested. In saying that, it's important for me to say that according to Turse, military service is one of the single most predictors, or it's actually the single strongest individual predictor of becoming a mass casualty offender, as Nick acknowledges in the headline on the Intercept. And so when we're looking at evidence, ladies and gentlemen, between 1990 and 2022, 170 individuals with U.S. military backgrounds plotted 144 mass casualty attacks in the United States. That is a lot, 144 persons with U.S. military backgrounds. And this raises the question as to whether the U.S. military should look within. It also raises a question as to why. Why is this happening? Well, there is research that is pointing to that. And so research shows that deployment to combat zones, so this was the highest of a predictor of a mass casualty offender. So individuals who were deployed to a combat zone were more likely to commit acts of this nature. So that's 39%. And evidence also shows that individuals with combat experience, so if you're in the military and you have combat experience, you're the second most highest to commit an act like this. So that's 26.6%. And I would even go on to say that the third most highest is the punitive discharge, ladies and gentlemen. So that is 32.1%. 32.1% was the third most, the third predictor, 32.1%. So think about it. You have the deployment in the combat zone, 39%. And then you have evidence, so individuals with combat experience, that's 26.6%. And then you have punitive discharge, 32.1%. So if a person has been punitively discharged from combat, they are more likely to commit an attack like this, unfortunately. Now, surprisingly, because everyone thought that persons with PTSD were more likely to commit an attack like this. And to tell you the truth, I thought that as well. I was thinking, okay, this person had PTSD, so this was probably the driving force behind this attack. But no, ladies and gentlemen, evidence shows that PTSD was the lowest predictor. So if you had PTSD, that was the lowest predictor of committing an attack, as we've seen in New Orleans and as we've seen also in Las Vegas. And I want to go in deeper to talk about another issue. So Brianna Joy Gray had an interview with a journalist named AlanMacLeod. And so AlanMacLeod talks about surveillance within several different nations, but he specifically focuses on Israel. But ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that we're being transparent about all the states that are involved in these surveillance activities, such as the United States and the Republic of Ireland. An interesting point that MacLeod made in his interview with Brianna Joy Gray was that when it comes to surveillance, ladies and gentlemen, that sometimes surveillance agencies, they're collecting all this incriminating information, and incriminating does not necessarily need to be uh, criminal information. It could just be information that you don't want public. And so basically, what MacLeod states is that surveillance, intelligence agencies have been collecting information on individuals, and that this information is used to blackmail people. And you can kind of see how sometimes intelligence agencies are attaching themselves to vulnerable persons from one period of time to another period of time, for quite some time. They're attaching themselves to these people and intimidating them 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I think that we need to bring awareness to this, because I think it's this kind of intimidation and use of blackmail that may drive people to commit acts like we have seen in Las Vegas. That doesn't mean that everyone would commit an act like that. Some people recognize a state's attempt to do these conversion practices, or a state's attempt to push them into radicalization, right? But not all persons are aware of this. And for those persons that aren't aware, it can be quite difficult for them to contend with this kind of pressure that happens daily, having their content, so diametric content saturation, having their content receiving an influx of opposing content to shape their opinions and beliefs about a particular issue. And so that's deeply concerning. I think what needs to happen in these cases, ladies and gentlemen, is that we need to bring awareness to state-sponsored radicalization. We need to ensure that if states are looking into people, if the state is genuinely interested in wanting to know if a person is a threat to national security, that it should ensure that it is actually investigating that situation and not trying to push people over the edge to commit acts that are contrary to national security. And for me, that is actually deeply concerning when states do that. And we don't really know a lot about, we only know what the state tells us, right? That's all we know. We know what the state tells us. We know what information the state is giving us. But ladies and gentlemen, I think what is deeply concerning is that whenever we see an attack like we've seen in New Orleans, or we see an attack like we've seen not only in New Orleans, but attack like we've seen in Las Vegas, what often happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that what we are seeing is that the state is scrubbing their social media accounts. The state is scrubbing their LinkedIn accounts. The state is scrubbing everything that's on the internet about these people. Scrubbing everything. And when the state is scrubbing everything that's on the internet about these people, ladies and gentlemen, so we don't know exactly what the story is. What really is the true story? We don't know if the information that the state is putting out is legitimate. We don't know if the state is trying to shape our opinions and our beliefs about specific groups. And so my call to action would be for the state to keep that information transparent, to keep it online. So if a person does commit an act like this, that information is open to the public to interpret. Don't take their social media accounts down. Don't take information about what they posted online down. Don't take any of that down. Leave it up and let the public form their own, come to a consensus about this person. And so we don't get the opportunity to do that when the state takes all that information down. So think about it, ladies and gentlemen. In these two cases, so the Las Vegas incident and also the New Orleans incident, what did journalists and social media influencers and activists, et cetera, what did they do? You had to rush and screenshot everything before the state took it down. And it shouldn't be that way. And I don't think that there's a law that states that the state is obliged to remove everything offline that the person has posted. That should be an archive so people can really, to reiterate, draw a consensus about how the person came to commit an attack that they committed. That's one. And then two, not only draw a consensus about how this attack happened, but people can kind of understand how this person became radicalized. Because when the state cherry picks from what it takes offline, then the story doesn't make sense to the public. And what that does is that causes us to distrust the government. And if the government wants us to trust it, it needs to be transparent about persons who are being radicalized, and if they are being radicalized, by who. It needs to be transparent about its involvement. And so we understand that in some cases, there are informants that are attached to these persons, right? To the suspect. If they do commit an attack like that, then they become a suspect. But before they committed an attack like that, they're not a suspect. They are a victim. And so in a situation like this, ladies and gentlemen, we should know that information as well. Was there an informant, an undercover person, covert person that was pushing that person into radicalization? If so, who? All of this should be transparent. Now, I'm deeply concerned that when we talk about the state and its possible involvement in radicalization, often what the state does is it looks to treason laws and national security laws to silence dissent. And I want to remind the state that it's not compatible with paragraph 3 of Article 19 to invoke national security or treason laws to suppress or withhold from the public information of legitimate public interest that does not harm national security, or to prosecute journalists, researchers, human rights defenders, or others for having disseminated such information. So again, the state should not look to treason laws or national security laws to prosecute journalists, academics, human rights defenders for disseminating information on these topics that we're talking about in this video. And the state shouldn't retaliate against persons who are talking about these issues. So, for example, right now, I'm talking about the U.S. military. Should it look within? And the state shouldn't retaliate against me because, or you, or any academic, or any journalist, or any social media influencer, the state shouldn't retaliate because we're asking that question. Should the U.S. media, should the U.S. military, should militaries look within themselves? because there is a strong predictor that these attacks are happening within the military, people with military experience. The largest number, to reiterate, is those have been deployed. Should the military look within? And the answer is yes. It's time for the military to look within and to control to really, I'll take a step back. It's time for the military to look within, two, to develop some programs, training programs to identify radicalization within the military. And there should be, in my personal opinion, that there should be a rule that states that if a person is becoming radicalized, that should be brought to the attention of those in higher positions. And that person should not be bullied or threatened, but there should be a genuine conversation about how that is happening and why that is happening and who is trying to persuade that person to commit an act against national security. And so what do you think about this? Do you think that the US military should look within? Do you think that it's time for Do you think that it's time for the United States to develop policies that would curb actions that we've seen in Las Vegas and actions that we've seen in New Orleans? Do you think that I'm wrong? Do you think that maybe this reporting is wrong, that this reporting doesn't really go far enough? Do you think that the reporting is biased? Do you think that the reporting is saying one thing, but it's not giving a complete picture? Do you think that there is a far right problem within the U.S. military? If so, do you know what can be done to stop it and to curb it? That is the question. That is the question. So I want to remember, or I want to remind you that I'm doing this a bit early for the International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism, as and when conducive to terrorism. And so this is educational and awareness, bringing public awareness, raising activities to what we have seen in New Orleans and Las Vegas. I think that there is a real change that needs to happen. And I think that the United States has the capacities to make this change. And I think it's not now time for us all to denounce these kinds of acts and to say that it is wrong and to urge the state to really develop policies that are sensitive to persons who may be being radicalized and to catch the culprits who are trying to radicalize these persons who really don't want to be radicalized, but they're impressionable for some reason. And we must always stand against acts like this by peacefully bringing awareness to them, speaking out against them, and condemning them. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kiana Canada. I hope that this was an informative video for you. And remember, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.